The plane was halfway through its journey from Los Angeles to New York when things started to go wrong. It wasn't anything dramatic like turbulence or engine trouble, just a small child doing what children do best, being curious and restless. Ethan, a bright-eyed 5-year-old with messy blonde hair, sat by the window, his tiny hands busy exploring every button and lever within reach. He pressed the call button again and again, delighting in the soft ding it made each time. To him it was a game, a harmless source of entertainment while the endless sky stretched out beyond the window. His mother, Laura, sighed deeply. She had tried everything to keep him occupied, coloring books, snacks, even letting him play games. On her phone hadn't worked for more than 10 minutes at a time. Now exhausted and frustrated herself, she leaned over and whispered sharply, "Ethan, stop pressing that button. You're going to bother everyone." But Ethan didn't listen. How could he? At 5 years old, the world was still too big and exciting to follow rules all the time. Nearby, Emily, the flight attendant, watched the scene unfold with growing irritation. She had been working nonstop for hours, serving drinks, answering questions, and making sure everyone stayed comfortable. This particular flight was especially chaotic, filled with families traveling for vacations and business people eager to get home. Her patience was already thin, stretched taut like a wire ready to snap. When she saw Ethan hitting the call button, yet again something inside her cracked. "Excuse me?" Emily said, approaching Laura and Ethan with clipped tones. Her voice carried an edge of authority, the kind that usually silenced rowdy passengers instantly. "Could you please tell your son to stop pressing that button? It's not a toy." Laura looked up, startled. She gave Emily an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. I'll try to make him stop." Turning to Ethan, she added firmly, "Honey, no, more pressing the button, okay?" But Ethan wasn't paying attention anymore. He was now fascinated by the tray table attached to the seat in front of him, opening and closing it repeatedly. Laura groaned inwardly, wondering how much longer this flight would feel. Emily, however, wasn't done. She stood there, arms crossed, waiting for Ethan to obey. When nothing changed after a few seconds, her expression hardened. "Look," Emily said, her voice rising slightly. "If you can't control him, maybe I should step in. Some people are trying to sleep here." Laura bristled at the comment. Sleep? On a daytime flight packed with families? Still, she bit back her retort, not wanting to cause a scene. Instead, she grabbed Ethan's hand gently and pulled it away from the tray table. "Stop it, Ethan, please." For a moment, it seemed like the situation might resolve itself. Ethan quieted down, staring out the window instead. Emily nodded curtly and turned to leave, muttering under her breath about unruly kids. But fate had other plans. As Emily walked past their row, Ethan suddenly leaned forward, reaching for the cup of juice Laura had placed on the tray table earlier. In his excitement, he knocked it over, spilling sticky orange liquid all over Emily's crisp white uniform. For a split second, everyone froze, including Ethan, whose eyes widened in shock. Emily gasped, stepping back instinctively, her face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "Are you serious right now?" she snapped, looking down at the stain spreading across her shirt. "That's it. Enough." Before Laura could react, Emily reached out and lightly tapped Ethan's hand, not hard enough to bruise but firm enough to startle him. Ethan yelped, pulling his hand back quickly. Tears welled up in his eyes as he stared at Emily, confused and scared. Laura shot to her feet, fury replacing her earlier frustration. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp and loud enough to draw stares from nearby passengers. "You don't hit my child." "I didn't hit him," Emily shot back, though guilt flickered briefly in her eyes. I needed to get his attention. Do you have any idea how stressful this job is?" "That doesn't give you the right to touch him," Laura countered, her protective instincts kicking into high gear. "If you have a problem, take it up with me, not a 5-year-old. By now, several passengers were watching the exchange, some shaking their heads disapprovingly, others whispering behind raised hands. The tension in the air grew thicker, almost suffocating. Emily opened her mouth to argue further but thought, better of it. With one last glare at Laura, she stormed off toward the front of the plane, muttering angrily under her breath. 2 rows behind them, Jack sat quietly, observing everything without saying a word. Dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, he blended in perfectly with the other passengers. No one paid him any mind, which suited him just fine. He had always preferred staying out of drama, preferring to let situations resolve themselves, whenever possible. But this incident bothered him more than he cared to admit. As a grandfather, he couldn't help but feel protective of Ethan. Watching the poor boy cry silently while his mother argued with Emily stirred memories of his own childhood, times when he'd stood up for weaker friends against bullies. Back then he'd vowed never to let anyone treat someone smaller or weaker unfairly. Still, Jack hesitated to intervene. These days, he preferred keeping a low profile, avoiding attention unless absolutely necessary. Besides, Laura seemed capable of handling things on her own, or so he thought. After Emily left, Laura knelt beside Ethan, hugging him tightly and whispering soothing words. "It's okay, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't cry." Slowly, Ethan calmed down, though his lower lip still trembled slightly. Jack watched them for a moment longer before turning his gaze to the aisle where Emily had disappeared. Something about her reaction lingered in his mind, an underlying desperation masked by anger. He knew what it was like to be pushed to the brink, to feel overwhelmed by circumstances beyond your control. Maybe there was more to this story than met the eye. As the plane continued its journey, the atmosphere remained tense. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, speculating about what had happened. Some sympathized with Laura, calling Emily unprofessional. Others defended the flight attendant, claiming parents shouldn't let their kids run wild. Amidst the chatter, Jack sat silently, lost in thought. He glanced at Ethan once more, who was now clutching a stuffed animal Laura had dug out of her bag. Despite the earlier commotion, the boy seemed resilient, bouncing back quickly like most children his age. Jack smiled faintly, reminded of happier times spent with his own grandchildren. Laura caught his eye briefly and offered a polite nod, perhaps mistaking him for another concerned passenger. Jack returned the gesture, keeping his expression neutral. For now, he decided to stay out of it. But deep down, he knew he wouldn't forget this incident anytime soon. Little did anyone aboard the plane realize that Jack wasn't just any ordinary grandfather. Beneath his calm exterior lay decades of experience, wisdom, and strength honed through countless challenges. If push came to shove, he was prepared to step in, but only if absolutely necessary. Until then, he would wait, watch, and hope for the best. And so the flight carried on, with tension simmering beneath the surface. What none of the passengers knew was that this seemingly minor conflict would set off a chain of events far greater than anyone could imagine. The rest of the flight felt like an eternity. Laura kept Ethan close, whispering comforting words whenever he looked upset. She tried to distract him with his stuffed animal and snacks, but the damage had already been done. Every time Emily passed, by their row, Laura shot her a glare that could cut glass. Emily avoided meeting her eyes, focusing instead on serving drinks and collecting trash from other passengers. But it was clear she wasn't happy. Her movements were jerky, her jaw clenched tightly as if she were biting back angry words. Ethan, sensing the tension between his mother and the flight attendant, stayed unusually quiet. He didn't press buttons or play with the tray table anymore. Instead, he stared out the window, watching clouds drift lazily past. Occasionally, he glanced at Emily when she walked by, his wide eyes filled with confusion. Why had she tapped his hand? Was it really so wrong to spill juice? Meanwhile, whispers spread through the cabin like wildfire. Some passengers sided with Laura, shaking their heads disapprovingly whenever Emily came near. Others defended the flight attendant, muttering about how hard it must be to deal with unruly children during long flights. The division grew louder, turning what should have been a peaceful journey into something resembling a battlefield. Jack noticed all of this from his seat 2 rows behind. He saw the way people took sides, forming invisible teams based on whose version of events they believed. It reminded him of human nature. The constant need to pick winners and losers, even in situations where no one truly won. He sighed softly, leaning back against the headrest. Normally, he would have tuned out the drama entirely, letting it fade into background noise. But this time, something about it stuck with him. After a while, Laura decided to confront Emily directly. Waiting until the flight attendant finished her current task, she stood up and approached her near the front of the plane. "Excuse me," Laura said firmly, her voice low but steady. "We need to talk." Emily turned around slowly, her expression guarded. "About what?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "What happened earlier," Laura replied. "You touched my son, that's unacceptable." "I didn't hit him," Emily snapped, her patience clearly wearing thin. I needed to get his attention. You weren't doing anything to stop him." "That doesn't give you the right to lay a finger on him," Laura shot back, her voice rising slightly. "If you're having a bad day, take it up with someone else, not a 5-year-old. Passengers nearby perked up, eager to hear more of the argument. Jack watched silently, noting how both women seemed equally frustrated. Laura's protective instincts were understandable, but Emily's defensiveness hinted at deeper issues. Maybe she was burned out, overworked, or simply overwhelmed by the chaos of the flight. Whatever the reason, it was clear neither side was willing to back down easily. "You think I wanted this?" Emily retorted, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "Do you know how many times I've dealt with kids like yours today? Spilling drinks, kicking seats, screaming, they act like they own the place, and then parents like you sit there doing nothing to control them." Laura stiffened, offended by the accusation. "Are you saying I'm a bad parent?" "No, I'm saying you're not paying attention," Emily fired back. "Your kid knocked over my drink, ruined my uniform, and disrupted half the cabin. How is that okay?" Before Laura could respond, another passenger chimed in. An older man seated nearby interjected. "Ladies, calm down. Arguing isn't going to solve anything." Both women turned to him, startled. They hadn't realized others were listening so closely. Embarrassed, Laura returned to her seat, pulling Ethan along with her. Emily stormed off toward the galley, muttering under her breath about entitled passengers and impossible jobs. Back in her seat, Laura seethed quietly. She couldn't believe how dismissive Emily had been. Sure, Ethan could be a handful sometimes, but that didn't excuse treating him like he was some kind of nuisance. As far as Laura was concerned, the flight attendant had crossed a line and she intended to report her once they landed. Jack observed the aftermath of the confrontation with growing concern. He'd seen enough conflicts in his life to recognize when emotions ran too high for rational discussion. Both Laura and Emily were too caught up in their anger to see the bigger picture. What they needed was perspective, a chance to step back and understand each other's point of view. When the plane finally began its descent into JFK Airport, the tension reached a boiling point. Passengers gathered their belongings, preparing to disembark. Laura made sure Ethan stayed close, keeping a wary eye on Emily as the flight attendant prepared the cabin for landing. Jack remained seated, waiting patiently for the chaos to unfold. As soon as the plane touched down, Laura grabbed Ethan's hand and hurried toward the exit. She didn't want to waste another second on the aircraft. Emily followed close behind, trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. "It wasn't my fault," she insisted to a group of passengers filing out ahead of her. "The kid spilled juice all over me." Her words fell on deaf ears. Most people ignored her, eager to leave the cramped confines of the plane. But as Emily stepped into the jet bridge, she froze. Standing there blocking her path was Jack. His presence alone commanded attention. Even without speaking, he radiated authority. "Can we help you?" Emily asked cautiously, unsure why this stranger was standing in her way. Jack smiled faintly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "Yes," he said calmly. "We need to talk." For a moment, Emily hesitated. Then, seeing the determined look on his face, she nodded reluctantly. Whatever this man wanted, she couldn't ignore him, not when he carried himself with such quiet confidence. Behind them, Laura paused, curious about what was happening. When she saw Jack speaking to Emily, she approached cautiously. "Is everything all right?" she asked, glancing between the two. "This concerns you too," Jack replied, gesturing for both women to join him. "Let's find somewhere quiet to discuss this properly." Without waiting for a response, he led them toward a nearby seating area in the terminal. Passengers streamed past, oblivious to the brewing conversation. Jack chose a corner away from prying eyes, ensuring privacy for what was about to happen. Once they were seated, Jack leaned forward slightly, his voice calm yet firm. "Now," he began, addressing Emily first. "Tell me why you thought it was acceptable to touch a child." Emily swallowed hard, suddenly feeling very small under his gaze. For the first time, she realized who she might be dealing with. There was something familiar about this man's demeanor, something iconic. Her mind raced, trying to place him. Could it really be? Before she could dwell on it further, Jack continued. "And Laura," he said, turning to Ethan's mother, "tell me why you believe your son's behavior excuses disrupting an entire flight." Both women exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. Under normal circumstances, they might have argued further, defending their positions passionately. But something about Jack's tone made them pause. It wasn't harsh or accusing, it was measured, almost gentle, yet carried an undeniable weight. Laura spoke first, her voice quieter than before. "I don't think Ethan did anything wrong, he's just a kid. Kids make mistakes." "I agree," Jack said, nodding. "But being a child doesn't mean he shouldn't learn boundaries. Parents play a role in teaching those lessons." Turning to Emily, he added, "That said, discipline isn't the same as punishment. Striking a child, even lightly, is never the answer. It only escalates conflict." Emily opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. She wanted to argue, to justify her actions, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, tears welled up in her eyes, surprising even herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt him. I was just frustrated." Jack studied her for a moment, his expression softening slightly. "Frustration happens to all of us," he said, "but it's how we handle it that defines us. Tell me, why are you so stressed?" The question caught Emily off guard. No one had ever asked her that before, at least not genuinely. Taking a deep breath, she admitted, "Work has been overwhelming lately. Long hours, difficult passengers, not enough breaks. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." Jack nodded knowingly. Burnout can bring out the worst in anyone, but it doesn't excuse losing control. You owe these two an apology. Emily looked at Laura and Ethan, shame washing over her. "I'm sorry," she repeated, this time with genuine remorse. "I shouldn't have reacted the way I did. Please forgive me." Laura hesitated, torn between her lingering anger and the sincerity in Emily's voice. Finally, she sighed and nodded. "Apology accepted," she said softly. "Just don't let it happen again." Ethan, sensing the resolution, smiled tentatively at Emily. She managed a weak smile in return, grateful for the olive branch. Watching the exchange, Jack felt a sense of satisfaction. Conflicts like this often stemmed from misunderstandings and misplaced frustrations. By addressing the root causes, healing became possible. As the three of them parted ways, he hoped they carried forward the lessons learned from this encounter. And as Jack walked away, blending seamlessly into the crowd, neither Laura nor Emily realized the true identity of the man who had helped them reconcile. To them, he was simply a wise stranger passing through their lives briefly, but his impact would linger long after he disappeared from view. The airport terminal buzzed with activity as passengers disembarked from various flights, dragging suitcases, chatting loudly, or rushing to catch connecting ones. Amidst the chaos, Jack sat quietly on a bench near Gate 27, flanked by Laura and Emily. Ethan stood close to his mother, clutching her leg tightly while peeking out at Emily with wide, cautious eyes. The atmosphere around them was tense but quieter than before, like the calm after a storm. Jack leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice remained steady and calm, carrying a tone that commanded attention without raising it. "Let's start over," he suggested, looking at both women. "Laura, tell me more about what happened today, from your perspective." Laura hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to share. She glanced down at Ethan, who was still gripping her hand, then looked back at Jack. "Ethan's just a kid," she began softly. "He gets excited easily, especially on trips like this. I tried to keep him entertained, but nothing worked for long. When Emily touched him, it felt wrong. No matter how frustrated she was, that wasn't okay." Jack nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He turned to Emily next. "And you? What's your side of the story?" Emily took a deep breath, fidgeting with the hem of her stained uniform shirt. Her earlier defensiveness had melted away, replaced by something closer to regret. "I know I messed up," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's been a rough day, not just today, but weeks. Long shifts, difficult passengers, not enough breaks. I snap sometimes, and I shouldn't. When Ethan spilled juice on me, I lost control. It wasn't about him. It was about everything else piling up." Her honesty surprised even herself. For months she'd bottled up her frustrations, pretending they didn't exist because admitting weakness felt impossible. But here, sitting across from a stranger who radiated wisdom and understanding, the truth poured out almost effortlessly. Jack listened intently, his expression unreadable yet kind. After a pause, he spoke again. "Both of you are right and wrong in different ways, Laura. Ethan's behavior isn't malicious, but kids do need guidance. They thrive on structure, even if they don't realize it. And Emily, frustration, doesn't excuse crossing boundaries. Discipline should never involve physical force, no matter how minor." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Neither woman argued, sensing the truth in what he said. Instead, they exchanged hesitant glances, each silently acknowledging their part in the conflict. "Now," Jack continued, his tone softening further, "let's focus on fixing this. Apologies are a start, but actions speak louder than words. Emily, what can you do to make things right?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. She hadn't expected him to ask for solutions rather than punishment. Taking another shaky breath, she addressed Laura directly. "I'm truly sorry for what I did. If there's anything I can do to make it up to you and Ethan, please let me know." Laura studied her for a moment, searching for sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. Turning to Ethan, she added, "Say thank you to Emily for apologizing." Ethan hesitated, his grip on his stuffed animal tightening. Then with a small, timid voice, he murmured, "Thank you." Emily's heart softened at the sound of his tiny voice. She smiled faintly, wiping away a stray tear. "You're welcome, Ethan. I promise I'll be more patient next time." Jack watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. He knew apologies weren't always enough to mend broken trust, but they were a step in the right direction. Still, he wanted to ensure this incident didn't end here. There was an opportunity for growth, if both women were willing to take it. "Emily," Jack said gently, drawing her attention back to him. "Stress and burnout affect everyone differently, but ignoring them only makes things worse. Have you considered talking to someone about how you're feeling? Maybe a counselor or therapist?" Emily shook her head quickly, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I don't think I need therapy," she muttered. "It's just work stress. Everyone deals with that." "That's true," Jack agreed. "But bottling it up doesn't help either. Trust me, I've been where you are. Sometimes having someone to talk to makes all the difference." His admission caught her off guard. She stared at him, wondering how someone so composed could relate to her struggles. Before she could respond, Jack reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Handing it to her, he explained, "This is a colleague of mine, a therapist who specializes in workplace stress. She helped me through some tough times years ago. If you ever feel like you need support, give her a call." Emily accepted the card reluctantly, turning it over in her hands. She didn't say anything, but the gesture touched her deeply. For the first time in months, she felt seen, not just as a flight attendant, but as a person struggling to keep up. Turning to Laura, Jack asked, "And you? Is there anything you'd like to add?" Laura thought for a moment, then replied, "I guess I could have done more to keep Ethan occupied. I didn't mean to cause trouble for anyone." "That's fair," Jack acknowledged. "Parenting is hard, especially when traveling. But remember, teaching kids respect starts early. It's not about punishing them, it's about guiding them." Laura nodded, understanding his point. She glanced down at Ethan, who was now leaning against her leg, yawning tiredly. Despite everything, he seemed content, oblivious to the weight of the conversation happening above him. As the discussion wound down, Jack stood up, signaling the end of their impromptu meeting. "Thank you both for listening," he said sincerely. "Conflict happens, but resolving it takes courage. I hope today helps you move forward." Emily rose to her feet, clutching the business card tightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Laura echoed the sentiment, offering a small smile. "Yes, thank you. I appreciate your help." With that, Jack stepped away, disappearing into the crowd of travelers. Within moments, he blended seamlessly into the background, leaving behind only the memory of his calming presence. Emily lingered for a moment, watching him go. Something about him felt familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. Shaking her head, she turned back to Laura. "Well, I guess I'll see you around," she said awkwardly. Laura nodded. "Take care of yourself, Emily, really." As they parted ways, Emily tucked the business card into her pocket, already considering whether she'd use it. For the first time, in ages, she felt a flicker of hope, a chance to reset, to find balance again. Back at the gate, Laura picked Ethan up, settling him on her hip. "Ready to go home, buddy?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, resting his head on her shoulder. As they walked toward baggage claim, Laura replayed the conversation in her mind. She realized Jack had been right. Guidance mattered more than control. From now on, she vowed to approach parenting with patience and understanding, just as he'd suggested. Meanwhile, Jack strolled through the terminal, reflecting on the encounter. Helping people resolve conflicts wasn't something he sought out often, but when opportunities arose, he embraced them. Watching Emily and Laura reconcile reminded him of the power of empathy and communication. Even in the busiest, most chaotic places, small acts of kindness could create ripples of change. He exited the airport and stepped into the crisp evening air. Jack allowed himself a rare smile. The world moved fast, full of noise and distractions, but moments like these reminded him why slowing down mattered. By choosing understanding over judgment, compassion over anger, people could heal wounds they didn't even realize existed. And so life carried on, for Laura, Emily, Ethan, and even Jack. Each carried forward lessons learned from that unexpected meeting, proving that sometimes strangers could leave lasting impacts simply by caring enough to. Weeks passed since the flight incident, and life began to settle into its usual rhythm for Laura and Ethan. They returned home, unpacked their bags, and resumed their daily routines. Yet the memory of that tense confrontation and the stranger, who had helped them reconcile, lingered in Laura's mind. She often thought about Jack, the quiet yet commanding man who had stepped in when emotions ran high. There was something about him she couldn't quite forget, though she couldn't put her finger on it. One Saturday afternoon, as Ethan sat on the living floor engrossed in his coloring books, Laura decided to check the mail. Among the usual bills and advertisements, she found an envelope addressed to her in neat handwriting. Curious, she opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter from Emily. The letter read, "Dear Laura, I hope this note finds you well. I've been meaning to write to you for some time now, but finding the right words hasn't been easy. First, let me say how deeply sorry I am for what happened on the plane. My actions were wrong, and I regret losing my temper like that. You were right to stand up for Ethan. He deserved better. After our conversation at the airport, I took some time to reflect on everything. Talking to your father-in-law, Jack, wasn't it? made me realize how much stress I'd been carrying. He gave me the name of a therapist, and honestly, it's made a world of difference. I'm learning to manage my emotions better and to handle challenging situations without snapping. I wanted to share something else with you too. Inspired by our talk, I started volunteering at a children's hospital during my days off. Spending time with kids there has reminded me why I became a flight attendant in the first place, to help people travel safely and comfortably. Seeing their smiles keeps me grounded even on tough days. Thank you for showing compassion despite everything that happened. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm committed to being better. For myself, for passengers like you, and especially for children like Ethan. Sincerely, Emily. Laura read the letter twice, her heart swelling with unexpected emotion. She hadn't expected Emily to reach out, let alone express such genuine remorse. Setting the letter down on the coffee table, she glanced at Ethan, who was happily scribbling colors onto his page. For a moment, she wondered if he remembered any of the flight incident. Probably not, she thought. Kids had a way of moving on quickly. Still, the letter touched her deeply. It wasn't just Emily's apology. It was the effort she'd clearly put into changing herself. Laura felt proud, knowing that their brief encounter might have sparked something meaningful in Emily's life. Maybe Jack had been right. Small acts of kindness really could create ripples of change. Later that evening, Laura shared the letter with her husband, Mark. As they sat together on the couch after putting Ethan to bed, she handed him the folded piece of paper. "Read this," she said simply. Mark scanned the letter, his eyebrows raising slightly as he reached the end. "Wow," he murmured, looking up at Laura. "That's really impressive." "I know," Laura replied, smiling faintly. "I didn't expect her to follow up like this. It makes me think about what Jack said, that everyone deserves a chance to grow." Mark nodded, leaning back against the cushions. "Speaking of Jack, did you ever figure out who he is? Something about him seemed familiar." Laura shook her head. "Not really, but honestly, I don't think it matters. Whoever he is, he changed things for Emily, for us, maybe even for himself." Mark chuckled softly. "Sounds like Grandpa Jack all over again. Always stepping in quietly, leaving a mark without needing recognition." They both fell silent, reflecting on the mysterious man who had played such a pivotal role in resolving the conflict. Neither of them realized the full extent of Jack's influence, not just on Emily and Laura, but on countless others throughout his life. Meanwhile, Emily's life had transformed in ways she never anticipated. Following Jack's advice, she contacted the therapist whose business card he'd given her. At first, she hesitated, unsure if therapy would actually help. But after their first session, she began to see the value in opening up about her struggles. Slowly, she learned techniques to manage stress and frustration, practicing mindfulness exercises whenever she felt overwhelmed. Volunteering at the children's hospital also proved transformative. Every weekend, Emily spent a few hours reading stories, playing games, and simply talking to young patients. Their laughter and resilience inspired her, reminding her of the joy and innocence she'd once loved about her job. Over time, she found herself approaching work with renewed energy and patience. Her colleagues noticed the change almost immediately. Gone was the short-tempered, easily irritated Emily, who snapped at passengers or complained endlessly about her shifts. In her place stood someone calmer, kinder, and more understanding. Even difficult situations no longer rattled her as they used to. One day, while serving drinks on a particularly chaotic flight, Emily encountered another restless child, a toddler kicking the seat in front of him repeatedly. Instead of reacting angrily, she knelt beside him and asked gently, "What's your favorite animal?" The question caught the boy off guard, and soon he was chatting excitedly about dinosaurs. By the time Emily left, he was happily drawing pictures in the airline-provided activity book. Passengers watched the interaction with approval, whispering compliments about how patient she'd been. Emily smiled to herself, realizing how far she'd come since that fateful flight. What had once felt impossible now seemed natural, all because of one conversation with a stranger. Back at home, Jack continued living his quiet, unassuming life. He spent most of his days tending to his garden, taking long walks, or spending time with Ethan and his other grandchildren. Though he rarely spoke about his past adventures, his family knew he carried decades of wisdom within him. His ability to step into conflicts and guide people toward resolution amazed them, even if he dismissed it as nothing special. One afternoon, while sitting on his porch sipping tea, Jack received a surprising phone call. It was Emily thanking him for his guidance and sharing updates on her progress. Her voice brimmed with gratitude, and Jack listened patiently, offering words of encouragement. "You're doing great," he told her warmly. "Remember, growth takes time. Be kind to yourself along the way." When the call ended, Jack set his phone aside and gazed out at the horizon. Helping people resolve conflicts wasn't something he sought out intentionally. It just happened naturally. Watching Emily transform gave him a sense of fulfillment, proof that even the smallest gestures could leave lasting impacts. As the sun dipped below the trees, casting golden light across the yard, Jack reflected on the interconnectedness of human lives. Each person we meet carries their own burdens, hopes, and dreams. Sometimes all it takes is a moment of understanding to shift someone's path, or our own. And so life moved forward, for Laura, Emily, Ethan, and Jack. Each carried lessons learned from that brief yet profound encounter, proving that compassion and forgiveness could bridge divides and heal wounds. Though none of them fully understood the ripple effects of their actions, they trusted that kindness, no matter how small, always mattered. Months passed and life continued its steady rhythm for everyone involved in the flight incident. For Laura and Ethan, things returned to normal, or as normal as they could be with a curious 5-year-old constantly exploring the world around him. Laura often caught herself thinking about Emily's letter, wondering how much effort it must have taken for her to write it. She tucked the letter away safely in a drawer, keeping it as a reminder of forgiveness and growth. Ethan, meanwhile, grew more adventurous by the day. His fascination with airplanes never faded, and he frequently asked his mother when they could fly again. Each time, Laura hesitated before answering. Part of her worried about encountering another situation like the one on that fateful flight. But deep down, she knew avoiding planes altogether wasn't fair to Ethan, or to herself. So she promised him that someday soon, they'd take another trip together. At the same time, Emily embraced her new routines, finding balance between work and personal growth. Her volunteer shifts at the Children's Hospital became a highlight of her week, filling her with purpose and joy. The kids adored her, especially when she brought small gifts like stickers or coloring books. Their smiles reminded her why she chose this career path in the first place, to make travel and life a little brighter for others. Her colleagues noticed the change too. Where once Emily had been known for her sharp tongue and quick temper, she now earned praise for her patience and kindness. Passengers complimented her service, leaving glowing reviews about how helpful and cheerful she was. Supervisors began recommending her for promotions, impressed by her newfound dedication. Despite these positive changes, Emily still thought about Jack often. His calm presence and wise words stayed etched in her memory, guiding her through tough moments. Though she didn't know who he truly was, she felt grateful for his intervention. Without him, she might have continued spiraling into frustration and burnout, unable to see a way out. One evening, after finishing her shift, Emily decided to pay forward the kindness Jack had shown her. On her way home, she stopped by a local bookstore and picked up a copy of a popular self-help book about managing stress. The next morning, she left it anonymously on the break room table at work, along with a note. "For anyone who needs it, hope this helps." It was a small gesture, but it made her feel good knowing she might inspire someone else to seek help. Meanwhile, Jack carried on with his simple, contented life. He spent his days gardening, reading, and spending quality time with his grandchildren. Ethan visited often, always eager to hear stories about the old days. Jack indulged him with tales of adventure and bravery, though he kept them light and fun, careful not to glorify violence or conflict. One sunny afternoon, as Jack rocked Gently in his chair on the porch, Ethan ran up to him breathlessly. "Grandpa Jack," he exclaimed, holding out a crumpled piece of paper. "Look what Mommy gave me." Jack took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a photocopy of Emily's letter, slightly worn from being handled so many times. At the bottom, Laura had written a short note. "This is what happens when we choose kindness over anger. Thank you, Dad, for showing us the way." Jack smiled softly, feeling a swell of pride. He handed the letter back to Ethan, who looked at it curiously. "What does it mean, Grandpa?" the boy asked. "It means," Jack replied, leaning forward, in his chair, "that people can change if we give them a chance. And sometimes helping someone doesn't mean doing big things. It means listening, understanding, and believing in them." Ethan tilted his head, trying to grasp the concept. Then, shrugging, he grinned and said, "Okay," before running off to chase a butterfly fluttering nearby. Jack chuckled quietly, watching the boy play. He thought about all the lives touched by that single flight, the lessons learned, the bridges rebuilt, the ripples created. People often underestimated the power of small actions, assuming only grand gestures mattered. But Jack knew better. A kind word, a patient ear, or even just staying calm in the face of chaos could shape destinies in ways no one anticipated. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with shades of orange and pink, Jack reflected on his own journey. He'd seen plenty of conflict in his lifetime, both large and small. Yet he always believed that true strength lay not in force or intimidation, but in compassion and humility. Helping Laura and Emily reconcile hadn't been heroic. It had simply been the right thing to do. Later that night, as he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy looked up at him with wide eyes. "Grandpa Jack," he said sleepily. "Are you a superhero?" Jack laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. "No, buddy," he replied. "I'm just a man trying to do my best." "But you're special," Ethan insisted, yawning. "You fix things." Jack paused, considering the statement. Maybe there was truth in it. Fixing things didn't require capes or superpowers. It required care, patience, and belief in the goodness of others. If that made him special, then so be it. "Good night, Ethan," Jack whispered, kissing the boy's forehead. "Sleep tight." As he turned off the light and closed the door behind him, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. Life was unpredictable, full of challenges and surprises, but amidst the chaos there were moments of connection, growth, and healing. Those moments, no matter how fleeting, made everything worthwhile. And so, the story came full circle, for Laura, who learned the importance of guiding rather than controlling; for Emily, who discovered strength in vulnerability and growth through reflection; for Ethan, who moved forward with innocence and wonder; and for Jack, who proved that even the simplest acts of kindness could leave lasting legacies. Though none of them fully understood the impact of their choices, they trusted in the ripple effect of compassion. In a world often divided by anger and misunderstanding, they chose empathy instead. And in doing so, they reminded themselves, and each other, that humanity thrived not on perfection, but on the courage to keep trying, to keep forgiving, and to keep believing in the possibility of change. The sun set completely, blanketing the world in darkness. Yet somewhere, a light remained, a quiet, steady glow, born from the shared hope that tomorrow would bring new chances to make things right.